Hello, Mike Pelonzi back with another episode of Safe and Sound. Very excited to be here today. We're going to do a show on keeping you and your children safe in the online world. We're all hooked up online. We're all connected. Whether we like it or not, this is the way it's going to be. So today, I have a special guest, Chris Height from Provari. He's going to talk to us about many subjects, how to keep us safe, virus protection, backups, what to do, what not to do, and some of the mistakes people make. Well, Chris, welcome to the show. Thank you.
Good to be here.
Tell me a little about yourself. Tell them, how'd you start? What are you doing?
I've been an IT consultant for 44 years. I actually started long enough ago that I had to sell computers because nobody had them. So if I wanted to do programming and consulting, I had to get a computer into their hands. So that's how long I've been doing this. Provari has been around for 25 years. And we do all kinds of IT consulting, both high-end consultative and design work and day-to-day managed services, keeping people functional, secure, fully operational with their IT systems.
That's awesome. And I love the fact that to create your industry, you went out and sold it so they would need you to come back and do your IT work. So, I mean,
that's how it worked back then.
That's the smartest thing ever. That's a great idea. All right. So I know we all started with desktops back in the day, and laptops were very expensive years ago, and not too many people have them. Now everyone has laptops and even more iPads. What's the advantage over a desktop and a laptop? Is one better than the other for the average person? Besides the mobility, are they more secure or stable?
It's not really a matter of security or stability. It's really a matter of feature and functionality, right? So the laptop is clearly more portable. And for most people, that's a significant advantage. But you're also stuck with the form factor that's there, right? So a desktop sometimes can be more powerful. It can be less costly. If you're buying a notebook, closing the screen and attaching two large screen monitors to it and never moving it, then you're paying for a screen you're not using, right? But from a security perspective, they're very similar. The iPads and Android tablets can theoretically be a little more secure because they simply don't do as much, right? So there's a smaller attack surface. They don't have all the capabilities of a desktop, whether that desktop is running Windows, Linux, or Mac. They're more capable, therefore there's a larger attack surface to worry about.
Okay. I know a lot of people just use their cell phones now for almost everything, almost eliminating some of these things because you see people, they're doing banking, they're posting on social media. How's that working out as far as functionality, viruses? We're going to talk about viruses shortly. Phones, do phones get viruses? Can a phone get a virus?
Phones absolutely get viruses.
Really?
And there's a risk that is much less common in computers and laptops. And what that risk is the stores. Whether it's the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, there's thousands of applications written to do one little thing for you. And we have a tendency to go, I need to calculate a mortgage payment. So I go into the store and I find something that'll calculate a mortgage payment that doesn't cost me anything because I don't want to pay for the app, and I download it and I run it. And we're counting on Apple and Google verifying those apps, and they do a very good job, but they don't do a perfect job. And we hear all the time about apps that are being pulled from the store because it's been discovered they've got some back door, whether it's an actual virus on the phone or more likely they're gathering your data, possibly your password for your bank, certainly your contact list, emails in your email application, all of that, bringing it back and selling that information. But you need to be aware of those apps when they're pulled because they can't uninstall them from your phone. So Apple or Google may pull an application from a store, but it's still on your phone. So if you don't have some kind of an updated malware protection on your phone, and you're not reading the thousands of emails from Google and Apple, then you could have some app that was pulled 2 years ago that is still collecting your data, collecting your passwords, your usernames, your friends' cell phone numbers, all of it. An app on a phone is fully capable, if the permissions are granted, to send an email as you, to send a text message as you, So just like in the old days, we would see computers being co-opted to send out spam emails, we're seeing phones being co-opted to send out scam text messages, right? So that they can't really be tracked back, right? If they're coming from my phone, then you can't track those back to the actual bad actor.
And these apps would still be on the phone. We'd still be using it. We just would never know that it was taken off, right? There's no way, unless you research to say, hey, did you guys pull this?
Right.
I could have apps on my phone right now I'm using that could have been pulled 2 years ago. I wouldn't know.
Exactly. That's the challenge, right?
That
So
is a
they've been
challenge.
pulled, and there was an email sent somewhere, and there was an article somewhere, but it's extraordinarily difficult to keep up with that. So you really do want an anti-malware, what we used to call antivirus, but it's much bigger than that now. And indeed, the traditional virus isn't really so much what we see. Malware, basically bad actors, right? They're encrypting data, they're sending out communications to try to convince other people to do things, and they're mostly collecting data, right? They're looking for any way into a bank account, into an email system, anything like that, where they can turn it into a profitable event for them.
Because no one ever reads accept just to get the thing going, right? That's what we do. Whether it's on,
Yes.
no one's going to read and go through. So yes, we're going to accept it. Okay, now it's running, awesome, but we're accepting letting people do bad things. Is it the same software to protect the laptop as the phone, or is it two different systems?
So it can be. Most of the major providers that you're familiar with on a PC, right? Symantec, used to be Norton, ESET, Malwarebytes, most of them do indeed have an application for the phone as well. There are also phone-specific ones. Most of the providers, the Verizons and the T-Mobiles of the world also provide a service. You can get, the $7 a month and they protect your phone from physical damage.
Yep.
Most of them have a package that says $10 a month, protect the phone from physical damage and provide anti-malware. So that's a path that you could follow. Or very often, the home versions of the protection for PCs usually will cover 2 or 3 devices, right? So you're paying that $30 or $40 a month or $30 or $40 a year, depending on your product.
Yep.
And it will often cover 2 or 3 devices. So you may have the rights to install it on your cell phone, on your tablet, on your other home PC, and you just need to do that, right?
So when they say devices, they're talking about phones and PCs.
Typically, they
tablets,
mean whatever they have the
anything's
product
out there.
for. Absolutely, yeah.
My friend says, get away from this. Get a Mac. Macs can't get infected. True or false?
I hate to tell you your friend is wrong.
Okay. He's not an IT guy like you. He's not going to sit here and give us advice on IT. Trust me. I'm like, I don't think that's really accurate.
The challenge is that for years it was kind of true, but it wasn't necessarily true because the Macs were inherently more secure. Bad actors go where the money is. And when Apple was 2% of the market, there was no real reason to attack them. Same with Linux when it first came out, right? There was a lot of talk about, open source is inherently more secure. People have reviewed the code. The bad guys can review the code too and find mistakes. Linux wasn't attacked very often because there wasn't a lot of it and it wasn't doing important things. Now, there's a lot of Linux and it's doing a lot of very important things. And now it is absolutely being attacked. Same with the Mac, right? It was always doing fairly important things, but it was such a small part of the market. Where are you going to put your energies, right? If there's 100 people I can attack and 98 of them have a Windows PC and 2 have a Mac, I'm going to put my energy on attacking the Windows because I got 98 people, right?
Right.
But now that they are a significant portion of the market on the Mac side and an even more significant portion in tablets and phones, I think they're more than half the market in tablets and phones, now there is value to the bad actors of spending the time and effort to attack them. So what was kind of true originally was only true because people weren't attacking them, not because it was inherently more secure. And even if it is somewhat more secure, not enough to defeat the bad actors.
Yeah.
Right. So you need malware protection regardless of what you're using. Linux, Mac, Windows. Maybe if you've got an old DOS program, maybe you can get away with it, but I wouldn't suggest that.
just like the older computers that did not suffer that disaster, was it 2 months ago when that upgrade?
Yep.
We talked about that before we came on, that there was a certain company that didn't suffer because their computers are so old, the upgrade wasn't compatible with it and they kept running.
Right. But the downside is they didn't get attacked by that, but they are running old systems that are not secured. So if a bad actor decides to intentionally attack them, which they surely will now that that's out in the news, they don't have updated security, so they're bound to get attacked, and it'll be much harder to thwart the attacker in that scenario. So it's a double-edged sword. Until nobody notices, the old system maybe doesn't get those attacks, but the old system is also not being secured, not being updated. You really never should be running a tablet, phone, or computer that has an operating system that is outdated enough that the manufacturer is no longer supporting it with security patches, because you absolutely will get compromised.
And we've all been compromised or lost things, and we'll talk about that. You said something, I've heard it, but I don't know what it is, and I'm sure people watching have heard it, Linux, okay?
Yes.
Windows, sure, Mac, sure, and then now you come up with Linux. Now, I've heard it in the world, but can you give me a version of that? Like, quick, like, explain it to me, like, I have no idea what it is.
I will do my best. Linux, for the most part, Linux is just an operating system, right? So the operating system is the software that boots up and starts our computer and provides all of the services that the applications we really want to use need, right? And the two most of us are familiar with are Windows and Mac. They are operating systems. Both of them are made by companies for profit, and they're what we call closed source, right? You and I can't look anywhere and see how that was written. We have to sort of trust that Apple and Microsoft have done their job, right? Linux is just another operating system, but it started in the world as what's called open source. A man, Linus Torvalds, started it as, I think, a school project or maybe just a hobby. I don't really recall. That was a number of years ago. It's based on Unix, which is an operating system you don't hear very often, and that's how it became Linux. It was Linus Unix.
Never heard that one either, so now there's another one.
Unix used to run the world.
Really?
Linux has really taken its place. And Linux has grown from a sort of a scrappy upstart to a full-service operating system that a lot of people use. One of its advantages is that you don't have to pay for it, right? It is open source and it is free. There are subscriptions you can pay for to get support, but it is managed and maintained by a very dedicated group of software doing this to help the world, to build the Linux community, and often to try to make money sort of somewhere else, right? If I have this good Linux operating system that's available to people, then I can leverage that, much like I had to sell computers in order to get them in the hands of people so I could program them.
Love that part of the story.
But a lot of the Linux people, it's the same sort of thing, right? If I contribute to this community and help Linux become a better operating system, I've got lots of other opportunities in my career now, right? I mean, there are people who are so good at working on Linux, they are given a job by major companies to just support Linux in the name of that company because they want to be involved in that, or they're using it. Because some major players, a lot of phone systems these days are built on the Linux operating system. A lot of firewalls are built on the Linux operating system. So those companies will pay some of their employees to help maintain the Linux operating system so that they have it available and have a say in its development because they are using it for significant products of their own.
Is it user-friendly like the other operating systems, or does it take some
It's
training?
not as user-friendly. It is getting better, but it is definitely a little more advanced in terms of setting it up and configuring it. It's getting a little better. If you've got some experience, you pretty much can plug in the CD these days and boot it up and get it running. But it is still, by the vast majority, considered something that requires a little more skill, understanding, and experience to set up and get running right. But again, it does come with the advantage of being free. So if you're a school, a large college, and you've got hundreds of servers running academic programs and student admissions. I mean, 100 servers for a Windows license or a Mac license, it's $600 a piece, it's $60,000, $70,000 every couple of years, right? And Linux is free in that scenario, so it can be a significant advantage. Same for somebody setting up a home network. If they're pretty skilled and they want to experiment, they want a home network, buying Windows, buying the Mac license, is a legitimate expense, and Linux can do away with that. So, again, there is a trade-off.
Yeah.
You need a little more skill, but you're trading your sweat for not writing a check to Microsoft or Apple.
Don't think I'm going to delve into the Linux just yet. I'm not really, and I don't think my wife wants me to delve into Linux either, because some days I'm yelling at this thing, I'm like, oh my God, this thing just isn't working.
Probably not, but there's a very good chance when you log into your bank, you're probably facing a Linux server, and you just don't know it.
Is this the point in the show I should say I don't bank online? So I still write checks and go down to the bank. And I was down there this morning with my little blue bank bag, just like my father had in the 70s. And
fair enough.
People make fun of me, but that's okay. I don't mind. All right. So we talked about the different operating systems. Any virus protection you recommend? And more importantly on that, let's keep our kids safe, like young kids.
Yes.
I mean, now they have access to the world. In my world, tell you, when our kids, many years ago, when this whole thing started and the internet, and they weren't even allowed to log in until we got home. Those days are over. So how do we keep it from getting infected, and how do we keep the kids safe? Like, what do you recommend?
So it's stunning to your point how quickly that changed, right? Even my daughter, who is now, she may not want me to say, but now 30, right? Yeah, when she was younger, didn't get a phone for quite some time and couldn't use it if we weren't around. And you're right, those days have dramatically changed.
I mean, I see little kids on their bikes, and there's a holder now made in the handlebar, and they're on their phones riding their bike. And I'm like, oh, this is just so awful. We're making a whole generation of people not going to be able to drive because they're going to put it on their dashboard someday when they get their license. But so they're out there. Kids are out there on their bikes.
They absolutely are.
How can the parents keep them safe? Keeping them from the sites kids shouldn't be on.
Yeah, and that's the big challenge. It really, the viruses are an issue, the malware is an issue, but there's so much more to it, right? Social engineering, really. I mean, we've always sort of had this challenge of how do we treat kids to be open and social, but also to not trust somebody who is somehow got nefarious intentions. But now, instead of it being the 20 or 30 people they see on the way home from school, it's the 20 or 30 million that have access to them from their phone.
I mean, that's the ultimate, and you remember this phrase, some people don't, stranger danger, right? Remember stranger danger? Yeah, so what do they do?
And back in the day, it took some effort, right? If a bad actor wanted to become not a stranger, they would have to find a way to talk to a child enough times to start to feel familiar and no longer be a stranger.
Right.
But now online, you could reach out to a child on Instagram, or it's probably not Facebook anymore. That's not cool enough for the kids. But any of those platforms, repeatedly enough that they no longer feel like you're a stranger and now they trust you. So there are definitely some automated programs, right? The anti-malware products, whether it's ESET or Symantec, McAfee, Malwarebytes, any of those are very good. But more than the malware, you want the actual website protection, right? The filtering, so that they can't get to sites that are talking about things that, frankly, children shouldn't be exposed to. Frankly,
exactly.
Some of us shouldn't be exposed to. Most of those software programs have a subscription for web filtering, or URL filtering is often what it's called, where you can either select certain categories, or you can even just say sort of appropriate for 12 and under or 15 or under. There are also some very specific phone-based ones that are very good, like Bark. And
you were telling me about Bark before we came in here. Set it up for the age group you want your child to be, and it should block, hopefully, what you want it to block.
And Net Nanny is another one that's very popular. Again, it'll go on a phone or a PC, and it'll try to tamp all that down. But we also need to talk to our kids. We need to try to educate them about the people that are out there. And it's interesting because when you broach this subject, most children will be like, yeah, Dad, I know. And in some ways, they know so much more than we do. But in other ways, they don't have the experience of who to trust and who not to trust. They haven't been burned enough, right, to have developed that skill set. And the challenge is we don't want them to develop that skill set in the worst possible way, right? So we really have to have communications with the kids. So we definitely want to put the software out there. We need to load up whatever it is, whatever the most expensive subscription out there is still worth the safety of your kids, right?
Of course, yes.
And so definitely don't look for the free one. And they change, right? So the ones that best today may not be the best in 9 months. So really go to the review sites, take a look. If the product you're using has fallen out of favor and is getting 3.5 stars out of 5, then definitely pick another and renew to that one, because they do change and new technologies come out and new capabilities come out. There's a brand new product that's still in beta that actually will open every one of your emails virtually and try to read it as a human being to figure out whether it's a scammer on the other side. And that's really impressive technology. It's not quite out yet. So they are likely to leapfrog ahead of almost everybody else in that regard when they're ready, right? Because AI is changing all of that. But again, you need to keep up on that, but you do need to engage with your children and have a conversation, because all of that protection doesn't change if one email gets through, one direct message gets through, and they start directly engaging with a bad actor.
And hopefully they have conversations with their friends' parents. Like, hey, my kid has, you said Bach, right? Bach and Net Nanny. Does your kid have that? Because maybe you don't want them over the house for 4 hours. That's unrestricted access to the whole world.
That is a valid point, right? And we all knew that one kid, when we were younger, who you could go watch the PG-13 movie or the R movie or whatever it was, even though you couldn't watch it at home, right? Now, the consequences of that was relatively mild compared to today's standards. Okay, I saw a movie my parents didn't really want me to see. But now, to your point, if I go to that kid's house because he's got access to the internet unfettered, the consequences isn't seeing some website, or some movie that the parents don't think he's old enough to see. It's a potential significant interaction with a bad actor who is trying to lure them away from their home, and really very, very serious consequences. So talk to your children, but also talk to your children's friends, parents, and make sure you're all on the same page, and definitely offering protection across the board.
Wow, look at that. We are just cruising through time. All right, I want to talk, thank you. Hope that helps a lot of parents. I know I would not want to raise a young child today. Fortunately, my kids are older. We made it. Happy, success. Let's talk about storage for a couple minutes, and then we do the tip of the day. Okay, so my backup, right?
Yep.
I just wear this around. I have a lot of stuff here. This is actually a terabyte on here, believe it or not. You like these, you don't like these. I know everyone's all about the cloud and putting things up there. What's your opinion on all this?
So there's no one size fits all, but it is important to note that you're plugging these into your computer. So if your computer's gotten infected and you don't know it yet, when you plug in the backup, you could indeed corrupt the backup and the computer itself. One of the biggest challenges is just that. These people who encrypt the data and try to get money from you to get it back, right? They're holding your data hostage. They're smart enough to get rid of every backup they can possibly find. So the cloud is a very good solution for that, because those aren't directly accessible. Most cloud services, when I write a new copy of the file, it's got the old copy there, right?
Yep.
But the disadvantage is there is an ongoing cost to that, and depending on the provider, something could happen to the provider. A very, very large backup-only provider lost 100 terabytes of client data, right? So it can happen. Very often it makes sense to back up to a disk, but also to a cloud provider. If you're a residential home user, chances are you have fairly inexpensive access to Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Drive or iCloud.
Do you like either
or
one of those better?
Dropbox.
Just for like a guy like me, like you know me. Is one better than the other? Is just my personal preference.
It's really personal preference, right? There may be specific features that are good for one person or another, but generally speaking, especially for backups, if it's a major provider, it's generally pretty good. Dropbox, iCloud, OneDrive. I'm sure I left somebody out that I just listed a minute ago. They're all very good, and they all do the job of getting your data off of your computer and trying to offer an extra level of protection. And while there's some legitimate concern about what if the cloud gets attacked, yes, it's possible.
Has the cloud ever been attacked?
All the time.
Really?
But-
Has the cloud ever successfully been attacked?
Yes,
Okay.
but less often than individual computers. The fact of the matter is that the vast majority of those cloud providers have significantly more resources than any individual could have. So while they are far more readily attacked, and because again, it's a large target,
Right.
they also have the kinds of resources 24/7 to protect themselves that most home users and frankly a lot of small businesses just don't have. So there's a trade-off, right? They're being attacked a lot more, but they have the resources to fend off that attack 100 or 1,000-fold greater than you or I would ever have, especially in a home setting. So while it's a concern, and it could happen, it's far more likely there is actually a device that you can simply sit on a table, and if somebody plugs it into their computer, you have full access. They don't have to run anything. They don't have to do anything. And virus programs won't know because it actually just looks like a keyboard and mouse that you're plugging in. And the quick answer to that is never plug in a drive you don't recognize, because it could be one of those. But that's how easy it is to get into a system that's just laying around, as opposed to the cloud systems that are protected by a virtual army of IT and cybersecurity professionals.
Passwords. We hate passwords, don't we?
Yes, we do.
So some of my browsers, they just store the password. Probably not a great idea.
Not a great idea.
I know the government just changed passwords for those people where they have to have 16 or more characters, uppercase, lowercase, special symbols. Not the government. Average person, how long should their password be? What do you recommend?
A minimum of 14 characters. 16 is nice. But I'll tell you how to do it and not have to worry about it. What we forget is think of passphrase. There's no reason your password can't be, I love personal safety. Throw in some upper and lowercase characters where people wouldn't expect them, a period or an exclamation point. That's going to be very difficult to guess, very difficult to hack, and it's very long, but easy for you to remember. It doesn't need to be a string of complete random characters. It can, and if it's a sentence, it can now be very, very long and quite secure, but much easier to remember. So passphrase is your shortcut without spending hours on the topic.
All right. Well, we're just about out of time. Actually, I think we're over time. So we always do tip of the day, and we discussed this earlier. One thing about personal safety, everyone's wearing earbuds. When you're wearing earbuds out in the world, running, whatever, take one out. That will allow you to hear what's going on around you and also listen to your music or a podcast, whatever you're listening to. I want to thank Chris Height again. Chris, where can people find you?
They can find me at the office. It's www.prevare.com. That's prevare.com.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.